Today, my natural science learners, I hope you are keeping fantastic and that you are keeping safe in these difficult times. Now, I hope you are ready today to learn something new. So let's get ready for today's lesson. I hope you enjoy. Grade 6's today's topic will be on insulators, and it is lesson 16, and today's date is the 31st of August. Now, before we get started, let's have a look at the instructions. Remember, most importantly, you need to write your date and your heading, as well as to make sure you write neatly and clearly in today's lesson. Use lots of color, as remember, it helps you remember important information. I'd please like to ask you to make sure you read all the information and listen to this video. Now, I would also like to ask you to take some notes throughout this lesson to make sure you fully understand what an insulator is. Remember, we have been working on what a conductor is. Now we're going to learn what insulators are, and you should be able to tell the difference between an insulator and a conductor after this lesson. I'd please also like to ask you to make sure you complete the required activities at the end of this lesson. And remember, if you are not done, it will be homework. Then, when you are done with that, I'd please like to ask you to rule off your work. I hope that you enjoyed today's lesson. Let's get started. Insulators. Some materials do not allow electrical energy to travel through them. These are known as insulators. Now, we need to remember that a conductor is a material that allows energy and electrical energy to travel through it. But when we talk about insulators, it's materials that do not let electrical energy travel through them. So when we think of an insulator, we need to think of things like plastic, wood, ceramics, glass, and rubber. These are all examples of insulators. Now remember, insulators do not conduct electricity and they do not let an electrical current flow through them. But what we need to understand is that an insulator is there to protect us. So, insulators are materials that are used to cover materials that carry electricity. So when we think of an insulator, we need to understand that it covers materials that carry an electrical current. Insulators do not conduct electricity, and insulators are there to protect us from electrical current. Now let's have a look at the use of plastic and rubber for electrical insulation. Insulating materials are used to keep the electricity in a circuit where it is useful. Now this stops the electrical energy from injuring a person or causing a fire. So when we think of an insulator and we think of using plastic and rubber as an insulator, remember it is there to protect us and to make sure we are not harmed as a person. Remember, an insulator is a material that is there to protect us from an electrical current, but it is also a material that keeps the electricity in. So it does not conduct electricity, but it helps us use it safely. We use electrical insulators to protect us from the dangers of electricity. All electrical wires, switches, and appliances are insulated in a building since they are connected to the main electricity. So when we think of plastic and rubber that we use for electrical insulation, if the insulation of an electrical cord is damaged, the cord must be replaced before you use the appliance again. The reason for this is that unfortunately, if the cord is damaged and you use it, you could unfortunately be shocked. Now remember, we need to remember our safety rules of using electricity and electrical appliances. So if the insulation of an electrical cord is damaged, make sure that it gets replaced before you use it again. We should use electricians as they know how to work with electricity safely. So remember not to go play around with electricity or electrical appliances if you do not know how they work. Now, if we look at the two images on this PowerPoint, I'd like you to just look at the circuit diagrams. Now, in the first circuit diagram, we use an insulator. Now, when we use an insulator in our circuits, the light bulb will not go on. So, in the first one, you will see they used an elastic band. In circuit diagram B, they used a key. Remember, a key is made out of a type of metal, which then means that we're using a conductor. If we use a conductor inside of our circuit, the light will go on. If we move down to picture number C, they used another insulator. They used a plastic clutch pencil, which then meant that electrical current cannot flow in that circuit. And then in the last diagram, they used a safety pin. Now, yes, a safety pin can conduct electricity, and that's why the light bulb is on. So if we look then to the next picture, some other types of insulators, there's an example of plastic, rubber, glass, and wood. These are different types of insulators, and remember, they protect us from an electrical current. Now when we look at the use of glass and ceramics for electrical insulation, we must think of transmission lines that are attached to pylons by insulators that are made from ceramics or toughened glass. This stops the electrical energy going from the cables into the metal pylons. So when we think of these pylons, this is what transfers the electricity from one point to another. These can be extremely dangerous, and remember, we should not go anywhere near them if we don't know what we are doing. This is something that someone does as a job. And remember, you need professionals to work on these pylons. As remember, these are transmission lines that actually transfer electrical energy from the cables to the metal pylons, and that's how we get electricity in our homes. So grade 6s, I hope you understand a bit more about what an insulator is and that you know what the difference between an insulator and a conductor is. Remember, a conductor is something that carries an electrical current and allows electricity to flow through it, where an insulator is a material that does not allow an electrical current to flow through it, and electricity is not allowed to flow through an insulator. It is there to protect us from an electrical current. So now when we look at this slide, there's 4 images. So we're going to start by looking at figure 12. Now, if we look at figure 12, we can see there is a damaged electrical cord. Now, we should not use any appliances that have a damaged electrical cord or wire because it can cause an electrical shock. We should instead make sure that this appliance does not get used until it is fixed. Then we move to figure 14. Only an electrician should repair damaged wiring in a house circuit. We should not all be playing around with our circuits in our houses unless we know what we are doing. So electricians are the best people for this job. Then we look at figure 13. Electrical wires that are used for different purposes are covered with different types of colors of insulation. So those are all different wires that are covered with insulation. If we look at figure 15, an electrician uses wire cutters insulated with plastic or rubber. Now I wonder, why do you think an electrician would use wire cutters that are insulated with plastic or rubber? Remember, if the wire cutters are made out of a metal, that part of it would be in a conductor. So if the electrician is working on damaged copper wires, they could have an electrical shock, and that's why they need the rubber on the wire cutters. Now when we look at the next slide, there's a couple more images. Figure 16, electricians use insulated screwdrivers to work on electrical circuits. The insulation is made of plastic or rubber. This prevents them from getting an electrical shock from the circuit or from the electricity passing through the metal screwdriver. If we look at figure 17, sometimes electricians wear insulating gloves made of rubber or leather in order to protect themselves from the electrical current. If we look at figure 18, these are power lines with ceramic insulators. Figure 18, power lines with, again, ceramic insulators. And then when we look at figure 19, never climb pylons or poles that carry electrical cables. Even if you think the wires are insulated, the insulation might be damaged, which could cause you to have an electrical shock. And remember, this would be dangerous to you and I. And remember, we are not electricians and we are not trained professionals, so we should not be going anywhere near pylons. Grade 6s, in the next slide, I just want you to have a look. Is it a conductor or is it an insulator? You should now be able to tell what the difference between a conductor and an insulator is, and whether or not it would make a light bulb switch on or off. Remember, we need to understand what does a conductor and an insulator do to our circuits. Now, an electrical current flows through some materials. These materials are conductors. So when we think of a steel paperclip, we will say steel is a conductor. So when you look at the first circuit, you can see that there is an electrical current flowing and the light bulb is on. Now, if we look at something where an electrical current doesn't flow through other materials, they are known as insulators. And remember, if we look at a plastic toy, so there you would have seen they put a duck, that is actually an insulator, which means that there is no electrical current moving in that circuit and the light bulb will not go on. Now that you understand what impact an insulator and a conductor has in a circuit diagram, I want you to remember this, as it will be something you need to understand in your cycle test. So grade 6s, I hope that you enjoyed today's lesson, and I really hope that you now understand the difference between a conductor and an insulator, and I hope that you now understand what an insulator is. But wait, pay attention. Please make sure that you have these notes in your workbook, and I would please like you to complete activity 5, number 2, 3 and 4, and activity 6, number 1 on page 133 of your natural science textbook. Please make sure you complete all of this in your workbook by the end of today's lesson. Now remember, if you do not have your natural science and technology textbook, I have uploaded a scanned version of the textbook onto Google Classroom. I have also made sure that the activities are attached to this PowerPoint presentation video at the end. I hope that you had a wonderful lesson today. Please make sure that you are up to date and that you have everything done so far for natural science. Have a wonderful day further, grade 6s.